kettle slipped from his hand and hit the tile floor with a sharp metallic crash. A split second later, the water followed. She screamed before her mind could even register what was happening. The heat slammed into her skin like fire, stealing her breath, twisting her voice into something unrecognizable. Her body jerked backward on instinct, hands flying to her stomach, but the damage had already begun. The world blurred into noise and pain and terror, and through it all, she heard his voice. Not panic, not fear, just a sharp inhale, as if something had gone wrong with the plan. "Oh my God," he muttered. She collapsed to her knees, the scream tearing out of her again, louder this time. The smell of heat and metal filled the air. Her heart hammered so violently she thought it might break through her ribs. "Why?" she cried, choking on a word. "Why would you do this?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at her, not rushing to help, not calling her name, not dropping to his knees, just standing there. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaky, but not with guilt. "It was an accident," he said quickly. "I swear, I tripped." She looked up at him through tears, her vision swimming, her body shaking uncontrollably. "You were standing still," she whispered. "I saw you." He shook his head too fast. "You're in shock. You didn't see it right." She tried to move toward the sink, toward anything that might help, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Pain screamed through her body. Her stomach tightened, fear slicing deeper than the burn. "The baby," she sobbed. "Please, the baby." That finally moved him, not toward her, but toward his phone. He stepped back as he dialed emergency services, his eyes darting away from her face. When the operator answered, his voice shifted completely. Calm, controlled, practiced. "My wife had an accident," he said. "She's pregnant. Hot water. Yes, we need an ambulance." She listened, lying on the floor, the tiles cold beneath her skin, the pain roaring through her like a storm, and something inside her cracked. Not from the burn, but from the way he never once said her name. Not once. The sirens came later. So did the neighbors. The paramedics moved fast, voices urgent, hands careful. Someone asked questions. Someone else covered her with a blanket. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she caught one last glimpse of him standing in the doorway. He was already typing on his phone. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, him looking down at his screen instead of at her, was the first piece of the truth. At the hospital, the lights were too bright. Everything smelled sterile and sharp. Doctors spoke in low voices. Nurses asked the same questions again and again. How did it happen? Where exactly were you standing? How far along is the pregnancy? She answered when she could. When she couldn't, she cried. He stayed close, playing the role perfectly. Hand on her shoulder. Soft voice. Concerned expression. He told everyone the same story. It was an accident. She startled me. The kettle slipped. People nodded. People believed him. Why wouldn't they? They had been married for 6 years. They were known as the calm couple, the stable couple, the ones who never fought in public, who hosted quiet dinners, who smiled in photos. No one saw what she was just beginning to see. Late that night, when the war was quiet and the machines hummed softly around her, she opened her eyes and found him sitting beside the bed, scrolling through his phone again. "Who are you texting?" she asked weakly. He flinched. "No one," he said too quickly, locking the screen. "Work." She swallowed. Her throat burned, but not from the injury. "It's past midnight." He sighed and finally looked at her. "I'm under a lot of stress." "So am I," she whispered. Silence stretched between them. Then he reached for her hand, his grip light, almost hesitant. "Try to sleep," he said. "Everything's going to be fine." But as he stood to leave, she noticed something that made her chest tighten. He didn't squeeze her hand before letting go. The days that followed blurred together. Pain medication, doctor's rounds, quiet conversations about risks and recovery. The baby miraculously was still alive, but the doctors were careful with their words. "We need to monitor closely. Stress is dangerous. Any complications coming immediately." He nodded at all the right moments, asked the right questions, held her hand when others were watching. But when they were alone, something was missing. Something cold had settled between them. At night, she would lie awake listening to him breathe beside her, replaying the moment in the kitchen again and again. The way he had been standing, the way the kettle had tilted so deliberately, the way his eyes had looked, not panicked, not shocked, just focused. She told herself she was imagining it. She had to. Weeks passed. Her body healed slowly. The scars faded enough to hide beneath clothing, but the fear didn't fade at all. It lived in her chest now, sharp and alert, whispering warnings she wasn't ready to hear. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she reached for his jacket and felt his phone vibrate in the pocket. She froze. She had never checked his phone before, not once in their entire marriage. Trust had been easy with him, or at least she thought it had been. The screen lit up, a name she didn't recognize. A single message preview glowed back at her. Did it work? Her fingers trembled. The phone vibrated again. "I can't keep waiting," the message continued. "You promised." Her heart slammed so hard she had to sit down. When he came home later that evening, she was sitting on the couch, the phone resting beside her like a loaded weapon. "Who is she?" she asked quietly. He stopped in the doorway. "Who?" he said. She slid the phone across the table toward him, the one asking if it worked. His face drained of color. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed, a short, hollow sound. "You went to my phone?" he snapped. "That's what we're doing now." "Who is she?" she repeated, her voice shaking. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "It's nothing. Someone from work. You're overreacting." She asked if it worked. She said, "What was supposed to work?" He stopped pacing. "You're stressed," he said slowly. "The doctors said stress would mess with your head." She stared at him. "That's your answer?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to let this go. For the baby." That was the moment something inside her shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. She nodded. "You're right," she said softly. Relief flickered across his face. That night, as he slept beside her, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. If he thought she was letting it go, he was wrong. She was just beginning to pay attention, and she would remember everything. She began to notice the pattern once she stopped pretending everything was fine. It wasn't dramatic at first, just small things that didn't belong. A phone turned face down, calls taken in the bathroom, late nights that were explained with vague words like deadlines and meetings. She watched him the way someone watches a stranger on a train, quietly, carefully, without letting on. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen stirring soup, she heard his phone vibrate again. He was in the shower. The sound buzzed across the counter, sharp and insistent. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She had already memorized the name. Lena, the same name from before. Her chest tightened, but her face stayed calm. She turned the stove down and stepped away, breathing slowly, forcing herself to think instead of feel. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, she smiled at him. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. He nodded distractedly, eyes already searching for his phone. When he saw it untouched, relief softened his shoulders. That told her everything she needed to know. At dinner, he talked more than usual. Too much. Work stories that went nowhere. Complaints about traffic. Plans for the future that sounded rehearsed. "We'll take a trip after the baby comes," he said, cutting into his food. "Somewhere quiet. Just us." She nodded. "That sounds nice." He reached across the table, squeezed her hand harder than necessary. "I want you to trust me." The words landed wrong. Trust wasn't something people asked for when they deserved it. That night, she waited until his breathing slowed, until the steady rhythm told her he was asleep. She slid out of bed carefully, ignoring the ache that still lived in her body, and went to the living room. She opened her laptop. She didn't search his name. She searched hers. Emails, cloud backups, old accounts she hadn't touched in years. And then she found it. A login alert from a dating site she'd never used. Her hands went cold. She clicked to the recovery options and reset the password. The account opened like a door she hadn't known existed. Messages scrolled down the screen. Months' worth. Her breath caught as she read. I wish I could just be with you. She doesn't understand me like you do. The baby complicates things. Her stomach twisted. She scrolled further. That night will solve everything. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. That night, the kettle, the hospital. The message timestamps lined up too perfectly to ignore. Her chest felt hollow, like something had been carved out and left empty. Tears blurred the screen, but she wiped them away. She needed clarity, not grief. She copied everything. Screenshots, dates, names. She saved them to a hidden folder, then backed them up twice. When she finally closed the laptop, dawn was creeping through the curtains. She sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, listening to the house wake up around her. He came into the living room, rubbing his eyes. Why are you up so early? She looked at him and wondered how she had ever mistaken him for safety. I couldn't sleep, she said. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. You worry too much. She flinched just barely. Over the next weeks, the truth revealed itself in fragments. She learned that Lena was younger, that she worked with him briefly before transferring departments, that she knew about the pregnancy and hated it. One message burned itself into her memory. She needs to disappear. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry in front of him. Instead, she listened. When he complained about stress, she sympathized. When he spoke about feeling trapped, she nodded. When he apologized for being distant, she forgave him. Each word he spoke became another thread in the net. She was quietly weaving. One afternoon, Lena showed up at their door. She was beautiful in a sharp, deliberate way. Perfect hair, perfect smile, eyes that flicked immediately to her stomach before settling on her face. Oh, Lena said softly. You must be her. Her smile tightened. Can I help you? I'm looking for him, Lena said. He said he might be home. The words landed like a slap. She forced a polite smile. He's not. Lena hesitated, then laughed lightly. I guess I'll catch him later. As she turned to leave, Lena paused. You seem strong, she said. Stronger than I imagined. The door closed slowly behind her. That night, when he came home, she told him about the visit. His reaction was instant. She came here, he snapped. Why would she? He stopped himself. She tilted her head. Why would she what? His jaw clenched. Nothing. She met his eyes. You need to end it. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. You don't know what you're asking, he said finally. I know exactly what I'm asking, she replied. For honesty. He laughed bitterly. You wouldn't survive it. The words chilled her. She smiled faintly. Try me? That night, she cried for the first time alone in the bathroom, biting her hand to keep quiet. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally grieving the man she thought she knew. By morning, the tears were gone. In their place was resolve. She called a lawyer under the guise of asking about maternity rights. She spoke carefully, hypothetically. The lawyer listened closely. If there's evidence of intent, the lawyer said, everything changes. She hung up and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Then I'll prove it, she whispered. The next step was dangerous. She began to record. Phone calls, conversations, casual remarks made when he thought she wasn't paying attention. One evening, while they watched television, he muttered, I never wanted this life. She turned to him. What life? He hesitated. All of it. She pressed gently. The baby, too? His silence was louder than any confession. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder, hiding the way her body tensed. I just want us to be honest, she said softly. He exhaled. You wouldn't understand. Try me. He looked down at her, and for a moment his mask slipped. I thought things would be easier if you weren't in the way, he said quietly. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. In the way of what? He swallowed. My future. She recorded every word. When he realized what he had said, his eyes widened. You're twisting things, he said quickly. I mean, it's okay, she whispered. I forgive you. He believed her. That was his mistake. Because forgiveness was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of the reckoning. She learned quickly that truth came out more easily when people felt safe. So she made him feel safe. She stopped asking questions. Stopped watching his phone too, obviously. She laughed at his jokes again. She let him complain about work and money and how trapped he felt. And she responded the way he wanted her to, with understanding. I know you feel overwhelmed, she told him one night as they lay in bed, the lights off. Anyone would. He exhaled, rolling onto his side. You don't blame me? For what? She asked softly. For resenting all of this. She shifted closer, careful with her movements. Sometimes resentment is just fear, she said. Fear of losing control. His shoulders relaxed. That was the night he started talking. It came in fragments at first. Complaints about responsibility, about expectations, about how life hadn't turned out the way he imagined. I had plans, he said quietly, before everything got complicated. She knew who everything was. She let him speak. A week later, he slipped up. They were in the car, stuck in traffic, rain streaking down the windshield. The radio murmured in the background. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, restless. She wouldn't stop pushing, he said suddenly. Who? She asked. He froze. You, he corrected quickly. You were stressed all the time. It made me feel cornered. She nodded slowly. That's why you were angry? Yes, he said too fast. That's why that day happened. Her heart thudded, but she kept her tone gentle. You mean the accident? His grip tightened on the wheel. I didn't plan it, he said. It just crossed my mind. She swallowed. Cross your mind how? He laughed nervously. You're reading too much into it. She reached out and rested her hand on his arm. I'm not judging you. He glanced at her, searching her face for suspicion. Finding none, he relaxed again. That night, she replayed the recording again and again. It just crossed my mind. That was no accident. The more comfortable he grew, the more careless he became. He stopped hiding his phone as much. He took calls in front of her, turning his body slightly away but not leaving the room. She heard Lena's voice once, soft, impatient, intimate. You said it would be done by now. Lena hissed through the speaker. He lowered his voice. Be careful. She didn't interrupt. She sat on the couch, hands folded over her stomach, listening. Later, when he ended the call, she looked up at him. Everything okay? She asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. Just work drama. She smiled faintly. You should resolve it. Lingering problems only get worse. The words lingered in the air between them. A few days later, she followed him. She hated herself for it, but she needed to see it with her own eyes. He told her he was staying late. She waited 20 minutes, then grabbed her coat and drove after him, keeping a safe distance as his car turned off the main road and into a quiet cafe parking lot. Lena was already there. They didn't touch it first. They talked, animated, tense. Lena gestured sharply, her expression hard. She's still here, Lena snapped. You said she wouldn't be. I said I'd handle it, he replied. Things got complicated. Lena laughed, bitter and sharp. She survived. That wasn't part of the deal. Her breath caught. He looked around nervously. Lower your voice. You promised me a life, Lena said. Not excuses. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't rush it. Lena stepped closer. Then I will. That was when she knew. This wasn't over. That night, she locked herself in the bathroom and threw up. Fear finally broke through her careful control. Not fear for herself, but for the baby. She pressed her forehead to the cool tile and whispered, I won't let them hurt you. The next morning, she went to the hospital under the pretense of a routine checkup. When the doctor left the room, she closed the door and lowered her voice. If something happened to me, she said carefully, what would the hospital record? The nurse frowned. What do you mean? If there was an accident, she clarified, or something intentional. The nurse studied her face for a long moment. Why are you asking? Because I need to protect my child. The nurse nodded slowly. Then document everything. Every concern. Every incident. Even suspicions. She did. She began leaving a trail. Emails to herself. Notes with timestamps. Conversations written down immediately after they happened. Doctor visits where she casually mentioned stress at home, fear, tension. She wasn't accusing. She was recording. One evening, he came home angry. Lena had threatened him again. He didn't say it outright, but his agitation filled the room. She's ruining everything, he snapped, pacing. Who? She asked calmly. You know who, he said, rubbing his face. She's impatient. She doesn't understand how delicate this is. Her stomach clenched. Delicate how? She asked. He stopped pacing. I can't talk about this. She stepped closer. You already are. His voice dropped. If you hadn't survived, none of this would be happening. The words landed like ice. She stared at him, her heart racing, but her face calm. That's a horrible thing to say. I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. I just meant things would be simpler. For who? She asked. For everyone. She stepped back. Including Lena? His silence was answer enough. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to his breathing, her mind racing through possibilities. She realized then that waiting for justice to come naturally was dangerous. She needed to force the ending. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. 2 weeks later, Lena sent him a message while he was in the shower. The phone buzzed loudly on the counter. She picked it up. This time, she didn't hesitate. You're running out of time, Lena wrote. I'm not asking anymore. Below it, another message. I'll tell her everything. Her hands shook, but her mind sharpened. She typed back. From his phone. She's suspicious. We need to be careful. Lena replied instantly. She should have died. Her breath left her in a rush. That was it. She took screenshots of everything. Backed them up. Sent copies to an email account her husband didn't know existed. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, she was sitting on the bed. Who's Lena? She asked quietly. His face drained of color. What? He said. I saw the messages, she continued. All of them. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You invaded my privacy, he said weakly. She laughed softly. You tried to kill me. That's not true, he snapped. You're exaggerating. She stood slowly, meeting his eyes. She said I should have died. He looked away. She's unstable, he muttered. She says things she doesn't mean. She said it to you, she said, and you didn't stop her. He slammed his hand against the wall. You don't understand the pressure I was under. She stepped back, heart pounding. Pressure doesn't make someone boil water and pour it on their pregnant wife. His breathing was heavy, his eyes wild. You survived, he said. Doesn't that count for something? The room fell silent. In that silence, she realized something terrifying. He wasn't sorry. He was inconvenienced. She picked up her bag. Where are you going? He demanded. To a place where you can't touch me, she said. He grabbed her wrist. You're not leaving. She yanked her arm free. Touch me again and I call the police. For the first time, he looked afraid. She walked out the door without looking back. But she knew this wasn't the end. Men like him didn't let go quietly. And Lena wouldn't either. The final act was coming. She didn't go far. She couldn't. Her body was still healing. And the baby's movements inside her were constant reminders that every decision now carried weight beyond herself. She drove to her sister's apartment across town, hands trembling on the steering wheel, replaying his words over and over again. You survived. Doesn't that count for something? Her sister opened the door and froze when she saw her face. What happened? She asked. She didn't answer at first. She stepped inside, locked the door behind her, and then the words came spilling out in broken pieces. The kettle, the messages, Lena, the words he had finally said out loud. Her sister listened in silence, her expression hardening with every sentence. This isn't just cheating, her sister said finally. This is attempted murder. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I don't have proof, she whispered. Her sister shook her head. You have more than you think. They spent the night going through everything. Screenshots, recordings, notes, dates. Her sister insisted on copying everything onto a flash drive and uploading it to a secure cloud folder. If anything happens to you, her sister said quietly, this doesn't disappear. The next morning he started calling. Once, twice, 10 times. She didn't answer. The messages followed. Where are you? We need to talk. You're overreacting. Think about the baby. Then the tone shifted. You're ruining everything. You don't know what you're doing. Come home. Now. She turned her phone off. That afternoon, Lena sent her a message directly. She hadn't known Lena had her number. Running away won't change anything. The message read, You're just delaying the inevitable. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. She typed slowly, Stay away from me. The reply came almost instantly. You should have stayed dead. Her sister didn't hesitate this time. We're going to the police. The station was quiet, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. The officer at the front desk listened politely at first, nodding, until she slid her phone across the counter and pressed play. The recording filled the space. If you hadn't survived, none of this would be happening. The officer's posture changed. They were led into a private room. Another officer joined them. Then another. Questions came quickly now. Dates, names, details. They took copies of everything. When they asked if she felt safe returning home, she answered honestly, No, that was enough. A report was filed, a case number assigned. They advised her to stay somewhere secure and to contact him immediately if either of them reached out again. That night, he showed up at her sister's building. She watched from behind the curtains as he paced outside. Phone pressed his ear, face twisted with anger. Lena's car appeared 10 minutes later. Her heart dropped. They argued in the parking lot. Voices raised, gestures sharp. You said you handled it. Lena snapped. I didn't expect her to go to the police, he hissed. Lena laughed. You underestimated her. She doesn't have enough, he said. Not yet. Her sister pulled her back from a window. You see, her sister said, they're scared. The next day, the police called. They had questioned him. He denied everything. She's unstable, he had said calmly. The pregnancy has made her paranoid. Lena told a different story. She tried to distance herself. Claimed she didn't know about the attack. Claimed he had lied to her. But then the officers showed her the messages. She should have died. Lena went quiet. By the end of the interview, she asked for a lawyer. The pressure mounted quickly after that. A restraining order was issued. He was ordered to stay away from her. Lena, too. He violated it within 48 hours. He left a voicemail. You think you've won? His voice sneered. You've destroyed my life. She listened to it once and handed it directly to the detective. That violation changed everything. He was arrested 2 days later. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed louder in her memory than the kettle ever had. Lena was arrested the same evening. Conspiracy, evidence tampering, threats. The headlines came fast. Neighbors whispered. Friends asked questions. His family called her crying, begging her to reconsider, to think about his future. She stopped answering the phone. The court hearings were slow and exhausting. She testified once, her voice steady despite the way her hands shook beneath the table. He stared at her the entire time, not with remorse, with hatred. Lena avoided her eyes. The evidence spoke louder than either of them could. Messages, recordings, medical reports, timelines. The prosecutor didn't rush. Neither did she. The day the verdict was read, she felt strangely calm. Guilty. The words settled into her chest, not with relief, but with finality. He was led away without looking back. Lena broke down, sobbing, her carefully constructed confidence finally collapsing. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Reporters shouted questions. She didn't stop. She placed a hand over her stomach and kept walking. That night, alone in a quiet room, she allowed herself to cry, not for him, not for what she lost, but for what she survived. The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her why she had fought so hard. She whispered, "We're safe now." But deep down, she knew the story wasn't finished yet. The consequences were still unfolding, and the world was about to learn exactly who they had underestimated. She thought the worst part would be over once the verdict was read. She was wrong. The silence afterward was heavier than the chaos that came before. No more police calls. No more court dates. No more adrenaline pushing her forward. Just quiet mornings, slow steps, and the long work of rebuilding a life that had been deliberately shattered. She moved into a small apartment a few months later. Nothing fancy. Just clean walls, sunlight in the mornings, and doors that locked firmly. The baby arrived early but healthy, a small, fierce cry filling the delivery room and undoing her in a way she hadn't expected. When the nurse placed the child in her arms, she wept openly. "You're safe," she whispered over and over. "I've got you, I promise." Motherhood changed her, but not in the way people expected. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't broken. If anything, she was sharper now, more aware, less willing to ignore discomfort for the sake of peace. The trial concluded fully months later with sentencing. He received years in prison. Not enough to erase what he'd done, but enough to ensure he couldn't reach her again. Lena received less time, having cooperated at the end, but her life outside prison was effectively over. Jobs disappeared. Friends vanished. Her name became a warning. Once, months after sentencing, she received a letter. No return address. She knew who it was from before she opened it. "I never meant for it to go this far," the letter read. "I loved you in my own way." Her hands didn't shake this time. She tore the letter in half, then into smaller pieces, then threw it away. "Loved and tried to erase you." Healing was not dramatic. It came in quiet moments. The first time she laughed without guilt. The first night she slept through without nightmares. The first time she caught a reflection and didn't immediately search for scars. People asked her how she stayed so calm through it all. She never gave them the full answer. The truth was, she had learned early that rage burned fast, but patience endured. That silence, when used deliberately, could be louder than screams. That survival wasn't about fighting harder. It was about thinking clearer. One afternoon, while pushing the stroller through the park, she ran into someone who had known them both. "I always thought he was such a good man," the woman said awkwardly. "I never would have guessed." She smiled politely. "That's how monsters survive," she replied, "by blending in." At home that evening, as she rocked her child to sleep, she reflected on how close she had come to disappearing entirely. How easily the story could have ended differently if she had reacted instead of observed, if she had screamed instead of listened, if she had confronted instead of collected. They had assumed pain would make her reckless. Instead, it made her precise. Years later, when her child was old enough to ask questions, she told the story carefully, not with bitterness, not with fear, but with honesty. "Some people hurt others because they want an easier life," she said gently. "But hurting someone never makes life easier. It only reveals who you really are." "Were you scared?" the child asked. She nodded. "Very. But you didn't give up?" "No," she said softly, "because giving up would have given them what they wanted." On the anniversary of the day, everything changed. She visited the kitchen where it had all begun. The house had long since been sold. New owners, new paint, new memories layered over old ones. She stood quietly for a moment. Then she left. The past no longer had permission to keep her. Some stories end with revenge. Hers ended with something far more unsettling for the people who tried to destroy her. She lived. She lived loudly in her own way, intentionally, fully, and without them. And somewhere, behind concrete walls and locked doors, two people were forced to live with the knowledge that the woman they tried to erase became the one who exposed them. Not by force, but by refusing to disappear. The end.